Hi, Lester, Wushu engineer. I've decided to investigate the pole today. Within Chinese martial arts, the pole or staff or Gwun is generally recognized as the mother of all weapons. It's often the first weapon that a Kung Fu practitioner trains with after sufficient bare hand fighting skill has been developed. I thought it would be interesting to look at a few impact and sustained force tests to ascertain the Gwun's potential as a weapon. The pole is a long reach weapon, but it's also typically very light. As such, it's very reliant on good bridging through the wielder's kinetic chain for it to become an effective weapon. Due to its length and light weight, it can be difficult to generate effective forces using the pole. In addition, if used without understanding, the pole can compromise the wielder, because if used carelessly, it can become essentially like a lever with the point of mechanical advantage on the opponent's side instead of on the wielder's side. The pole's main strength is its reach and perhaps the speed of its striking, which is also a function of its length. If the pole's reach is not used to the wielder's advantage, it can compromise its effectiveness as a weapon. So we'll go into some of the tests that I performed. Bear in mind that these tests are subjective because they involve measurements of my physical performance, which varies due to the fact that I'm not a machine. In terms of error associated with these tests, there are equipment measurement errors, but they're typically negligible in comparison with natural human performance variation. That's why I generally don't talk about measurement errors, despite the fact that they are present and associated with all attempts at measurement. There were two types of strikes that I investigated in this test. The first was a more restricted movement taken from a southern Hong family pole form that requires the end of the pole to be anchored to the practitioner's hip. These more from a southern style approach to close in fighting with a pole. The second was a more extended movement taken from a northern long fist pole form that involves the pole being extended away from the body for maximum reach, acceleration and velocity. And then the other movement that I'm going to be using is more from a northern set, which involves movements that swing the pole to its full extension. Now I'm going to be changing that slightly and striking from the side. Note that there were two poles that I used in these tests. One was a rattan pole, which is often used in training due to its flexibility and resilience. So bearing in mind that the pole that I'm using for this set of tests is rattan, which means that it's pretty springy. The rattan pole weighs approximately 800 grams. The other pole is a hardwood pole made of some type of oak and weighs approximately 1,000 grams or 1 kilogram. I performed the comparative set of impact tests based on the two different types of strikes, which I'll play here now. The first is using the Hong family strike on the Loadcell with the rattan pole. The second is using the Hong family strike on the Loadcell using the oak pole. As you can see, there was very little difference in terms of impact forces on the Loadcell. The peak force with the rattan pole was approximately 2,400 newtons, and with the oak pole approximately 2,000 newtons. Now we'll look at the northern strike using the rattan pole. And then with the oak pole. Once again, very little difference between the two in terms of impact forces on the Loadcell. the peak force with both the rattan and oak pole was just over 3,000 newtons. It was clear from these tests that the northern strike created larger impact forces due to the larger movement, acceleration, and thus impact velocity. So I decided to test the poles and strikes on the PowerKube. Firstly, we have the rattan pole test.
620, 8285, 6209, 9603, 10862, 11892.
Secondly, the oak pole tests.
12747, 19,000, 14, 22, 23, 26, 29, 28.
Once again, we have a clear winner in terms of impact energy, the northern strike. The oak pole southern strikes peaked at just over 20,000 franklins, and the rattan pole southern strikes peaked at just over 8,000 franklins. The oak pole northern strikes peaked at just over 29,000 franklins, and the rattan pole northern strikes peaked at just over 14,000 franklins. In addition, we have a clear performer in terms of the oak pole as well, which significantly outperformed the springy rattan pole on the PowerKube. The oak pole's rigid nature allowed me to deliver more compressive energy to the PowerKube. So what do these numbers in franklins mean? I'll leave a link in the video description below to a comparative scale provided by the manufacturer, but 29,000 franklins is in the range that you might expect from the impact of a welterweight pro boxer using perhaps a hook punch. As a comparison, I did some one-handed and two-handed striking tests with my flute, which weighs approximately 850 grams.
37, 45, 42, 46, 55, 73, 81.
The flute one-handed strike peaked at just over 46,000 franklins and just over 81,000 franklins for a two-handed swing. As a comparison, my current record for baseball bat strike against the PowerKube is just over 91,000 franklins.
91.
As a further comparison, my low roundhouse kick against the PowerKube peaked at just over 120,000 franklins. The best roundhouse kick noted on the scale of human force provided by the PowerKube manufacturer is just below 180,000 franklins. So in the light of these superior numbers, why would I use the pole as a weapon? Well, range is a critical factor in fighting. It may be tactically expedient to be able to strike an opponent at range with somewhat decreased force and energy than to allow them into your range and risk retaliation. As a final set of tests, I did some push tests with the poles in the southern and northern stances.
89, 79, 90, 108, 113, 110, 107, 22, 26, 23, 30, 30, 25, 30.
I just showed the rattan pole tests in this instance since the results for the oak pole were similar. As you can see, my ability to sustain forces at the tip of the pole was superior using the southern anchored pole stance. This would allow greater ease in terms of manipulation of an opponent using sustained force. In addition, the ability to sustain force at the tip of the pole using the southern striking stance may allow the wielder to better manipulate the way energy and force is transmitted into the target by increasing the apparent mass behind the strike. Unfortunately, I do not yet have the equipment to demonstrate this though. Well, I hope you enjoyed this somewhat rambling investigation. Leave a like and a comment and subscribe if you're so inclined, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.